maintain the queue as well. Also, if you are not speaking, please mute yourself so as to minimize the disturbances. Thank you.
Thank you.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakurutam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi stuve patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam katra sutrasya bhashyasya kramad vivaranasya cha. I think we were discussing the 16th sutra. So to give the background, in the 15th sutra, Patanjali discusses the first stage in the development of Vairagyam. Vairagyam means dispassion, an ability to restrain our mind and senses, which will help us to enjoy tranquility and peace. The beginning of de-identification. So in real, actual experience, it is practiced as a kind of detachment, a sense of renunciation, not being obsessed by a desire for something, to possess something. Roughly, it corresponds to Ihamutra Phala Bhoga Viraga, the first qualification for a student of Vedanta. So, in the Vedantic tradition, in the Advaita tradition, there are 7 steps, of which the first 4 steps are fundamental. It's called sadhana chadushtaya, sampatti. The first one is to have a feeling of a sense of what is real and what is unreal, and a feeling of detachment, or having no desire for things which are momentary, like fleeting pleasures of the senses or experiences, a kind of an ability to look beyond them. In other words, an ability to say no to the demands of the senses. When the eyes demand something, one should be able to say no to the eyes, telling no to the mind in reality. So also other 5 senses of perception should be restrained. That's actually, this is in more or less identical with the yamas and niyamas in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Actually, this is the beginning of higher evolution, human culture and civilization. So that is the first step. Ihamutra Phala Bhoga Viraga, in that sense, means an ability to renounce, to give up desire for things of this world and even for things of maybe heavenly pleasures and things like that. Well, this is, in fact, this is state of self-mastery. I mean, one is able to control one's own drives and desires and senses. That's why, Patanjali uses drishta anusravika, vishayabharat trishna, vasikara, some vairagya, means, this is vasikara, samya vairagyam. So, an ability to master by denying. So when you say no to your own senses, and the senses have to obey you, you are achieving mastery over your senses. When you follow the senses, then the senses are the masters and you are the servants. When you can say no to our own senses, then it's mastery. Actually, in fact, this is all about human evolution, not evolution at the biological level. In fact, it is also true. In fact, biological evolution also can be interpreted as a kind of ascending levels of self-mastery at the physical level, of course. When that self-mastery is applied to cultural level or levels of values, it is called Vairagya. But remember, this is only a kind of conscious effort to restrain. There is a deliberate conscious effort to do that, which itself means it is not the highest state of detachment. When you have to work for something, you have to work hard for something, it means you are not certainly not a great master in that art. If you want to put a lot of effort to achieve something, that means you are not a master. So in the first stage of Vairagyam, that is mentioned in the 15th sutra in Patanjali system, Drishta Anusravika Vishaya Vitrishnasya Vasikara Samjna. When in Drishta, it is Anusravika. Drishta means what is empirical, what is seen, what is gross. Anusravika means something that we can read about, hear about, learn about. Well, some scriptures tell you, if you do some good things, you will enjoy wonderful things in heaven. You will get some good results after death. That is Anusravika, not empirical. Of course, they are not very different from empirical pleasures, but they belong to different plane of existence. Now, when you don't have any desire for these things, then that is Vairagya. That is dispassion, stage number 1. It's very important to understand. Sometimes when we talk about the desire for heavenly pleasures, we should not dismiss it as something unimportant. People do terrible things expecting a great reward after death. Terrible, that is absolutely terrible. So thereby they are doing terrible things while living in this world, expecting wonderful things in heaven, and that means that is the opposite of spirituality or morality or ethics. So it's very important to remember that one should not even have a desire for heavenly pleasures. So heavenly, we should remember, in the yoga system and Vedanta system, heavenly is not anything related to spiritual. It is just empirical, that's all. So, that is the first step. Next step, that is higher Vairagyam, higher dispassion, that is mentioned in the 16th sutra, Tatparam Purushakhyadehe Guna Vaitrushnyam, that is the 16th sutra. It is a higher level of Vairagyam. It's called Paravairagyam, supreme dispassion. Roughly it corresponds to Paraksha Jnanam, so to speak. Paraksha Anubhuti we may call. See, you read scriptures, listen to lectures, and you are intellectually fully convinced of the logic of what you are learning. And so you know about it, and you have no doubt about it. So when you have a strong conviction as to what is the real meaning of life, when you are strongly convinced about the need to practice certain higher values, then our intellect and mind and emotions, they become pure, refined, kind of sattvic quality. But that is only an intellectual, emotional, attitudinal achievement. You have not realized it. But still, it takes you a long way towards this, towards developing samadhi. In fact, we should remember these two levels of dispassion, which are mentioned in 15 and 16 sutras. they constitute a prelude to understanding the meaning of samadhi, because sampragnata samadhi and asampragnata samadhi are going to be discussed in the coming sutras. So in the yoga system, when you realize intellectually the fact that you are not just this body mind complex, you are something beyond all this, and you are intellectually convinced about it. You intellectually do not identify yourself with the everyday enjoyments and pleasures which constitute different elements of Prakriti. So that's good. That in fact intellectual understanding and intellectual identity with a great ideal, it influences our attitudes. Though we may not have realized what you have intellectually convinced, but still the intellectual conviction can sometimes influence our emotions and feelings and attitudes and actions, of course. But still that is not the highest. It's not fully realized, but it is not the highest. Now, of course, when we talk about the Yoga Sutras, on the one hand, we should give the traditional meaning. On the other hand, it's a much more important. You should connect it to our own present 21st century life situation. And Yoga Sutras do have a great relevance in our own times. That's why some of the commentators will tell you that the first stage of dispassion, that is Aparavairagyam, mentioned in the 15th Sutra, it's like desires restrained with conscious effort. You have got the seeds in your bag, means in your mind. If they fall in fertile soil, they will sprout. But you don't allow them to fall in a fertile soil. So, for example, children growing, adolescent, those who belong to adolescent stage or below that stage, they should be exposed only to positive ideas, positive literature, positive values, spiritually, ethically, morally elevating ideas and teachings and lessons, because that will help them to restrain undesirable tendencies and feelings. It is an important thing. From a spiritual point of view, many people may have some samskaras in their mind. And those samskaras may not always be good. Some of them are very good, some of them may not be so very good. Negative samskaras can certainly be troublesome, can become problematic when you are surrounded by, let's say, certain unhealthy circumstances. For example, it is said human beings should not become prisoners of their circumstances. In fact, Yoga Sutra is aiming to liberate us from the prison walls of our own circumstances. The first stage in the development of dispassion, we are trying to restrain, control, restrict, prevent negative samskaras which are already accumulated in the mental system from establishing a connection to external world. That's why, as I mentioned, in schools, kindergartens, other places where young generation are being taught great values, we should create an atmosphere, a set of circumstances where they will have access only to elevating values, higher values, spiritually, culturally elevating, sublime values. Because seeds are there, seeds should not fall, seeds of negative samskaras, negative impressions should not fall on fertile soil. They should not sprout. So, they should, that's called, that is the first stage. Second stage is different, where seeds are there, but they will not sprout. They are called Dagdha Bija Nyaya. I mean, a way of explaining things using the analogy of burned seeds. Suppose you have seeds or different grains, not kept in your bag, but you burn it or you fry it and keep in a bag and put in your pocket. Even by mistake, if those seeds happen to fall on fertile soil, they are not going to sprout because they cannot become plants and trees. That is the next stage, second stage of dispassion. So very interesting, Patanjali is trying to give a graphic description of the evolution of the human ability, man's ability to say no to the pulse of senses, and the first stage, and then to transcend even that stage, where you get yourself established in an environment of positive spiritual values, and you are fully grounded, fully established in them, so that even if you happen to be in a unwelcome situation, in undesirable situation, you will be free from any trouble, because the seeds of the desires, undesirable desire, the seeds of negativity are all burned, you'll be fried, so they cannot sprout, they cannot give you any more trouble. That is the next stage, the higher vairagya, higher dispassion, which is explained in the 16th Sutra. But that itself is not samadhi, but that takes you to samadhi. So, of course, no doubt about it. Because when you are established in dharana, dhyana, which extends to samadhi, then you should be firmly established in that. For that, we should be totally free from any negativity, any negative samskaras in our mental system. And negative samskaras, as I mentioned earlier, they can be neutralized by positive samskaras and by meditation, prayer, and so on. Of course, this is discussed actually in the same sutra. So I shall try to explain this. That vairagya, that sense of dispassion, which is of the nature of non-attachment to the gunas. You are free even from the gunas, trigunas, the determining characteristics. And you have already achieved viveka khyadi. It is called higher dispassion. Now, this happens only through a process. It's called a reversal of evolution. The technical word used in the yoga literature is pratiprasava. Prasava actually means giving birth. So you have to remember the entire yoga system. The yoga system, Purusha, is our real nature. It is effulgent, but it is the enjoyer of the world. There are many similarities between the Purusha ideal of yoga, Sankhya, and the Atman ideal of Vedanta. The one fundamental major difference is Atman is kartrutva bhoktrutva rahita. That means it doesn't have any agency of an action, or it doesn't have the enjoyership of any action and its results. Now, the other one is Prakriti. So, the two fundamental categories in Sankhya philosophy and also Yoga philosophy. Now, there is an evolution taking place. What is evolution? From Prakriti, Mahatattva or cosmic intelligence, Hiranyagarbha comes. From Mahatattva, Ahankara or Asmida. Asmida will be mentioned in the 17th Sutra. We will discuss that. Asmida mentioned in the 17th Sutra that we are going to discuss is different from the Asmida which is included in the list of kleshas. Avidya, Asmida, Ragadvesha, Abhinivesha, klesha you find in the beginning of the sadhana pada. Avidya, Asmida, Raga, Dvesha, Abhinivesha. Pancha klesha. 5 kleshas are mentioned, which are actually the early part of sadhana pada, which actually are the results of certain samskaras, which actually constitute negativity, what we may call in modern times negativity. But avidya mentioned in the 17th Sutra is different. It is a sense of awareness. So, in the Sankhya system, from Prakriti, Mahatattva evolves. In other words, Mahatattva is an evolute of Prakriti. And from Mahatattva, Asmida, Ahankara, awareness evolves. And this Ahankara or Asmida has got 3 levels. Sattvika, that is more refined. Rajasiga, proactive. Tamasiga, which again is the source of evolution. Is the source of evolution of the 5 gross elements, Panchamahabhutas. So altogether you find 25 principles mentioned in the Sankhya system. Now, in other words, the whole universe can be analyzed in the light of this Sankhya or Yoga system of evolution. From the highest Prakriti, cosmic intelligence, from there Ahankara, awareness, and this Ahankara has got 3 levels, 3 dimensions. Sattvika, which is higher, more refined, Rajasiga next, and Tamasiga, the lowest of the stage of evolution of Ahankara. And all the empirical things that our senses enjoy, the senses connect with, belong to the lowest level of this evolution. So we are right now grounded at the bottom level of evolution. So a person who thinks that this body is the only thing that we should care for, and all that body needs should be properly taken care of. That is the whole of life. They belong to that lowest level of evolution. Now, from here you have to reverse this evolution. It's called Pratiprasava. The reversal of evolution. When this happens, first we deny the absolute reality of this empirical world, the sensory world, the sensory pleasures, the mental constructs, the intellectual ideas, and we slowly take steps upward in our upward journey, forward journey. We have come down to the lowest level by evolution. So evolution has got a peculiar meaning here, Evolution here means coming down. From Prakriti, you come to cosmic intelligence, then Asmida or Ahankara, and then eventually go below the mind, below the senses, you reach the sense objects level. Descent, that is evolution in the Sankhya Yoga system. And what is reverse evolution? Reverse evolution begins when we sit somewhere and read Shankara's Advaita Vedanta, Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, the Christ Sermon on the Mount, or at least Aristotle or Socrates. If possible, at least Henry David Thoreau's Walden. Because that is the nearest step, that is right in front of us. Reading Sermon on the Mount may be painful for many people who have come down a long distance from our real identity. People may not tolerate the assault of the great spiritual ideas or the parables of the Bible. Or the Shankara Vedanta will be very problematic. That's why many people try to tell you that Adi Shankara's Vedanta is life negating, world negating. No. Adi Shankara's Vedanta tells you that the world is not a permanent thing. Don't mistake that. To say the world is something permanent is as stupid as saying that this cup in which I'm drinking a glass of water, maybe a little water, this cup exists for trillions of years. If I say, nothing can be more stupid. This glass, this cup and its form did not exist maybe till 4 or 5 years ago. I bought it recently. Or the table or the chair on which I am sitting, it was manufactured 2 years ago. If I say this chair as such, name and form, Nama and Rupa existed for the last billions of years, it is absolutely stupid. Equally stupid is to tell if somebody tells that Advaita Vedanta negates the world, Advaita Vedanta doesn't negate the world, Advaita Vedanta tells what the world is really like. Now, when we try to read Vedanta, or when we go to a temple or a church and pray, or when we sit somewhere and think, well, am I just this physical body? If you are only the physical body, there is nothing absolutely wonderful to write about. We know what physical bodies are. At least every doctor knows, and every manager of a crematorium also knows. Everyone knows. There is absolutely nothing very profound or remarkable at the physical body as a conglomeration of 5 elements. Now, this was possible for Thoreau, not only for Christ. Of course, Thoreau from at a different level. So the point is, if one can really sit and think, well, I am something beyond this body, beyond the senses, beyond even the mind, then you are actually beginning the pratiprasava, means reversal of evolution. You are now slowly ascending the steps. And that's what is actually we are going to discuss in the 17th Sutra. That is a very famous sutra. So, this higher dispassion happens when you begin this reversal of evolution. It's called, you can say, reverse evolution. Okay, now that's why Vyasa, it'd be interesting for us to remind ourselves of the great statements made by the great commentators like Vyasa. Tasyam viraktam chittam tamabhikhyadim nirunadhi. Therefore, when the mind is detached from that, it restricts even the vivekakhyati. So Vyasa says, this paravairagya, the supreme detachment, is nothing but the highest state of knowledge. Now, after this, of course, we are going to the 17th Sutra, which is very famous, which is actually the first direct definition of Samadhi. I mean, Samprajnata Samadhi. You have to remember, Yogaha Chitta Vritti Nirodhaha. That's how Patanjali defined yoga. Yoga is nothing but Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Nirodha means, Vritti Nirodha means Samadhi. The last, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. And this happens in two different levels. Samprajnata, first, you may call it lower, and asamprajnata, you may call it higher. And the sutra is very famous, that is vitarka, vichara, ananda, asmida, anugamad, samprajnata. What is samprajnata samadhi? Now the Yoga Sutra till now was discussing in a very general way. Now samprajnata and asamprajnata samadhis are being discussed. Samprajnata yoga is that which is accompanied by vitarka, or by vichara, or by ananda, or by asmida. In simple meaning, vitarka means reasoning. At the gross level, you start thinking, well, I'm not this physical body. According to Vedanta tradition, Atmana Akasa Akasad Vayu Vayu Rakni Aknera Bhakabhya Prithivi Prithivya Moshe Deha Oshadi Bihannam is a Taittiriya mantra is there. From that absolute reality, space comes, from space, air principle, from air principle, fire principle, and from there water principle, and from there the earth, and from the earth all the trees and herbs and plants, fruits, everything like that. It means the five elements, the matter, so to call, M-A-T-T-E-R, the big letter, matter, that's all. So, you at that time, you are actually, it's called Pratiprasava. First, a person starts thinking, or he transcends his material identity, his matter identity, that may be a better term. He transcends. He is trying to undo his identification at the gross level with the material world. It is called vitarka, which is the grossest. It is called Panchabhuta Viveka, means, well, I am not the space or water principle or fire principle. I am not the five elements. I am something beyond all that. Shankaracharya stotras are the famous stotras. Shankaracharya exhausts everything. So practically all that we can do is to quote from him. That's the main problem. Actually, he has done a terrible thing. He has discussed everything. So whenever we do something, we will have to quote him. There's no other way. Something like that. So that is vitarka. Second is vichara. Vichara means sukshma. There also, you may sit somewhere and think, well, I am not this mind, I am not this subtle elements, we call tanmatras. I am not the mind. At the next stage of the ananda, you go beyond manomaya kosha. I am not this mind that is experiences sukha, dukkha, happiness, unhappiness, joy, pain, and so on. And I am not this body-mind complex. That is ananda. So actually, this is how, in a way, I tell you, this may call the Pratiprasava or reverse evolution. And this is what every civilized human being actually, how every civilized human being becomes a philosopher or a poet. Poet of a higher type, I'm talking about. Actually. And if a scientist is trying to restrict his inquiry to the level of this material empirical universe, a transcendentalist philosopher is turning his inquiry without using the laboratory, of course, at the speculative level to something higher. This is how we actually reverse our evolution. Remember, reversing evolution, it needs a lot of explanation here. We are not reversing biological evolution. What we are trying to do, when we actually take evolution to a higher level, we are in a way reversing biological evolution. That's the only way to explain it. Because if biological evolution makes a man feel that he is only this body, and life is all about taking care of this body, nothing more, nothing less, then we should say that yoga is trying to tell you, yoga is talking about another possible evolution. And that is called Pratiprasava. I mean, reverse evolution. And how do we do that? We have come all the way from Prakriti, from Purusha to Prakriti, and from Prakriti to Mahatattva, Ahankara, and to empirical Panchatanmatras and Panchamahabhutas, which are the products of the lowest dimension of Tamasika Ahankara, that is called. Really speaking. From here, we are slowly trying to say no to our senses. No to our mind, no mind. You have to think of something beyond the senses. And then you tell the mind, you have to think of something beyond pain and pleasure. And you have to think of something even that stands behind the mind, beyond the mind. And this is how this reverse evolution begins. And eventually, you reach a point where you identify yourself with your real self, capital letter, yes, Atman. And at that point, according to yoga, you understand your Purusha. A step beyond that, if you go to Advaita Vedanta, you realize that you are the all-pervading divine spirit. And this is the essence of reverse evolution. So, the Samprajnata Samadhi is the experience of this. That is, it is beyond Vitarka, beyond Vichara, beyond Ananta, and beyond Asmita. Asmita means cosmic self, awareness. I am even beyond mind. I am the absolute reality. When this experience is reached, it is the first stage in Samadhi. It's called Samprajnata Samadhi. There are many terms used here. It's called, Paribhashika Samjnas, means technical names used in the Yoga Sutra literature. Pratiprasava is one of them. I am trying to reduce or avoid as far as possible all technical samjnas, except when we quote or when we recite quotations from parts of different commentaries. Anyway, Bhoja is one of the commentators. Bhoja was himself a king, and he wrote the well-known book Rajamartanda on Yoga Sutras. And he says something very interesting. He says, Sammik samsaya viparida rahitattvena prajnayade prakashena jnayade bhavisya rupam yena saha samprajnata samadhi. So what is Samprajnata Samadhi? After understanding what Samprajnata Samadhi really is, it is a great joy to again understand the same through the lines of the great commentators. So according to Bhoja, Samprajnata Samadhi is that by which the true nature of an object is completely illumined or made known fully, free from doubt and misapprehension. Now, how do we understand this? When we understand an object, normally we understand an object only in a set of conditions or conditionings, limiting factors. But a person who has reached Samadhi level, he will be able to understand it exactly as it is, beyond its name form dimension. He will be able to identify it. That is the language of Bhoja. So you often find the word Samyak Jnayate, comprehensive understanding in a very comprehensive manner. Not in a very comprehensive manner. What it means is knowing something for what it is. Well, we can give many examples in this. Suppose we talk to a person A very ordinary person will judge another person or another object, or maybe something that you buy in a shop, or maybe an object, an individual, or anything, by what it appears. A person who is more intelligent will be able to judge an object, let's say a table or a chair or something, or any object for the matter. He can judge the workmanship or also the quality of the timber used to manufacture that chair. We'll say at a higher level, a person will be able to understand how valuable that object is for sitting. If it is something crooked, it can be a handicap for the physical health, or anything for that matter. Things which appear on the surface will have an appeal to everyone. But that what appears to be the only reality, only for the very gross-minded person. When a person becomes more subtle, more evolved, he will be able to read more into what he is seeing, what he is judging, what he is experiencing. So, if you push yourself far enough through yoga practices, you will be able to understand an object in its most comprehensive, transcendental dimension. That is the implication of Bhoja's statement here. And he says, Savitarkadi Bheda Chadurvithaga. And Bhoja says, and it is actually fourfold. So, Samprajñata Samadhi is fourfold. That we already mentioned. Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda, Asmita. That means, at one stage one may have this analysis, and eventually one realizes, well, I am not this physical body or anything. And another level, I am not even the subtle senses, I am not even mind or intellect, or I am not even my heart or intellect or awareness system, chitta, ahankara or anything, but I am the Atman, the reality behind all this. That knowledge is called Samprajñata Samadhi. It is actually the beginning of, or rather it is the indication of this Viveka Khyadi, supreme fundamental understanding of the nature of everything. That is Samyak Samsaya Viparya Rahitattvena Prajñayade Pakarshena Jnayade Bhavyasya Rupam Yena Sa Samprajñata Samadhi. Means a nature and object is Samyak Jnayade, completely, in a most comprehensive manner, properly understood. Now, we often, I think in my last lecture, perhaps, in my last Sunday lecture, I discussed this point. The subject was somewhat different. Swami Vivekananda's contribution to modern IT age. Swamiji talks about different levels of evolution of our awareness and understanding. At the grossest level, we have the information. We know certain things, or we are informed of certain things. What we call information. That information may have some practical use for us, or may not have any use for us. But the information is at the grossest level. When it becomes knowledge, that knowledge has got an awareness level. When we are aware of what we are informed, and when we know for what purpose this information can be used, and when that awareness of the utility of that information reflects in our character and behavior, it becomes knowledge. Even beyond that, when we know how to make proper use of that knowledge and how to avoid making improper use of that knowledge, it's called wisdom. This much, perhaps, a highly cultured, civilized person can give. Many people may not know how to use the information. Many people know how to use the information. Only a small percentage of people will know how it is important to make use of this knowledge only for the right purpose and awareness that it should not be used for the wrong purpose. It is wisdom. Now, at a higher level, insight. But insight here means an intuitive wisdom, intuitive knowledge. And it has a spiritual aspect to it. And it doesn't come unless a person has practiced certain fundamental spiritual disciplines, either through this path of Yoga Sutras, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, etc., or perhaps through bhakti, devotion, or any of these use. If a person realizes the fact through philosophy that this world is some purpose, some utility, modern science and technology have a purpose, but at the same time, that's not the whole picture of spiritual wisdom. There is something beyond all this. So this ability to look beyond the transcendental plane, it is called Viveka Khyadi, which we are going to discuss in the coming sutras. It is called intuition. I can just, as I mentioned once, it's mentioned, and some of the scriptures mention that only human beings can take this road to this higher intuition or wisdom. Because only human beings can liberate from the prison walls of their circumstances and look upon the whole human life in its wholeness, in its completeness, so that they will be able to look beyond the physical, the intellectual and mental aspect of life and look for something beyond all this, the transcendental. And that insight is going to be discussed under the subtitle we called Viveka Khyadi when we come to that part. Now coming back to the next sutra, of course, 18th sutra we are going to discuss. Yeah, here Anyaha means the asampragnata samadhi, the supreme samadhi is mentioned here. Virama pratyabhyasa purvaha samskara seshaha anyaha. The other yoga, anya means the other. We already discussed this sampragnata, but it is the higher one is mentioned. This other yoga, the asampragnata yoga asampragnata nirodha is preceded by the practice of virama pratyaya. Virama and pratyaya means virama of vrittis, complete stopping, cessation of vrittis. All vrittis are completely gone. Abhyasa is the cause of all this cessation. In other words, everything is gone, all the vrittis are gone, only there is a residue of samskaras which are not going to produce any harmful results. It's called asampragnata samadhi. It's called. Of course, here we should remember is the samadhi and yoga, all these terms are used in Vedanta and also Yoga Patanjali system. There are a few differences. First of all, Samadhi in the Yoga Sutra tradition is used in the sense of going beyond vrittis, only in that sense. Not Jiva Brahma Aikyam, not in that sense. That is a Vedantic interpretation. Again, Patanjali, in Patanjali's yoga or in his technical meditation, you don't find an inquiry into the subject. What is that? What is the nature of that? That is not discussed here. The whole process of understanding human mind, vrittis and samskaras, and this evolution, and how to reverse this evolution, and how to practice this eightfold discipline, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. And in this process, this meditation, especially dharana, dhyana, samadhi, samyama, these are the main subjects discussed. There is not a focused inquiry into the nature of absolute reality as you find in Advaita Vedanta. This is an important point to remember. That's why great Vedantis like Shankaracharya, who is actually the originator of Advaita Vedanta system, he does not consider Patanjali Yoga system as a complete science, as a complete science. It is important, it is very relevant, because it takes you very close to the highest level of fitness for Advaitic or spiritual experience. In that sense, it is very important. But it is not the Asamprakyata Samadhi of Yoga Sutra is not the highest spiritual experience as described in the in the scriptures of Advaita Vedanta. That's why it is not a complete science, but it is certainly a very big, a very relevant, very important study of the human mind. The one important contribution of Patanjali is he is actually placing a mirror right in front of you. Because in the mirror you can see only on your face. But in Patanjali's mirror, you can see your mind. You can see your own emotions. When you read, you understand, yes, actually it is true. It's a fact. You feel that way. But that's not enough to understand the highest spiritual truth. From there we have to go to the next stage of Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. We should read higher Vedantic books, meditate and realize our own true spiritual identity. So that is an important point to remember. Secondly, in Patanjali's system, all forms of concentration are objective. I mean, consciousness is invariably focused on an object. Direct inquiry into Purusha or self, or these are totally absent. So this is an important point to remember. We will discuss this again when we hold the next session. Now you can ask questions. Okay, thank you. Namaskar. Yeah.
Namaskar, Maharaj.
Namaskar. Yeah.
In the 16th verse, I've been reading the commentary by Swami Vivekananda.
Yeah.
And he talks about nature.
Yeah.
He says, whatever intelligence we see in nature is but a reflection of this self upon nature.
Yeah.
Nature itself is in sentiment. You must remember that the word nature also includes the mind.
Yeah.
Mind is in nature, thought is in nature. From thought down to the grossest form of matter, everything is in nature.
Yeah.
I've always understood nature to be the trees, the birds, the rivers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Could you elaborate on what he's saying?
Yeah. When Swamiji using the word nature, he's translating the word Prakriti. So Prakriti, so remember, Prakriti is translated as nature in English. Now Swamiji wrote Yoga Sutras, you have to remember, more than 120 years ago. So before that, maybe the original writings were included in the Harvard Oriental series were already translated by some authors into English, including even some of the commentaries, which if you read today, you will not be able to make out much meaning because there is so much, it's so obscure. So Swamiji's interpretation of Yoga Sutras is the first attempt to put things in a intelligible language in modern English. There's something very important to remember. So Swamiji here is translating the Prakriti into nature, and that's the only word we can use to translate the word Prakriti. Now, what is Prakriti in Sankhya Yoga system? I must explain this. Prakriti in Sankhya Yoga system is not the empirical nature, the phenomenal world, the trees and mountains and valleys, the clouds, everything that we see in front of us. It is that Prakriti includes our mind, our senses, our intellect. Mahatattva is this cosmic intellect. From cosmic intelligence is cosmic intellect. Nirnigarbha, asmida, ahankara, sense of awareness comes. And this awareness has got Sattviga awareness, Sattviga ahankara, Rajasiga and Tamasika. From Sattviga and Rajasiga ahankaras, mind and the Jnanendriyas and Karmendriyas evolve. And from the Tamasika ahankara, the Pancha Mahabhutas, Pancha Tanmatras and Pancha Mahabhutas evolve. Now, when Swamiji uses the word nature, he is actually he has in his mind the Sanskrit word Prakriti. I shall read, this is Sankhya Karika. Moola Prakriti Ravigriti Vigriti Mahadadya Prakriti Vigritaya Sapta Shodashagastu Vikaro Na Prakriti Na Vigriti Purushaka. What it says is, that is, from Prakriti comes Mahatattva, that is cosmic intelligence. From this Ahankara, that is Asmita. From there, the subtle dimension of 5 elements, Pancha Mahabhutas, which are called Pancha Tanmatras. From there, Pancha Bhutas, the gross elements, and then mind, 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, and 5 elements. All these evolved. What are they? First of all, Prakriti 1. From Prakriti, Mahatattva comes. Second, Ahankara. Third, Panchatanmatras, that means 5. The subtle dimension of 5 elements, that is Panchatanmatras. And from there, that together 7. And then mind, 5 senses of perception, 5 senses of action, then 5 elements, altogether 16, and then this is 24 altogether. Then Purusha, which is not involved in this evolutionary process, total 25. So, first of all, we should remember, Yoga and Sankhya systems are pluralistic in the sense they accept more than one reality. What are the two absolute fundamental categories in Sankhya and Yoga philosophy? Same thing. That is, one is Purusha, the other is Prakriti. Okay. From this Prakriti, all these things evolve, what I listed just now. So that Prakriti is translated by Swamiji into the English word nature. That's why he says mind, intellect, emotions are involved in nature. What is nature here? Nature is not what we normally mean by the word nature in our English dictionary. The real implied meaning is Prakriti, as mentioned in the Yoga Sankhya literature. So that's an important point to remember. In philosophy, a word has one definite, well-structured meaning and implication. In language, it could mean something different. Or it may, in language, it's just a fragment of what it could mean in philosophy. That's an important point.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. These questions give me a chance to explain things more completely, you know. To understand Swamiji's contribution, you can read the translations of Yoga Sutras, some of them with commentaries, which are already done almost the middle of 19th century. Some of those translations are included in the Harvard Oriental series. They are absolutely wonderful book. In fact, we should be grateful to those great Indologists who took this painstaking effort to translate them. But they won't communicate with you if you read today. But if you read Swamiji, Swamiji puts things very sensible. So Swami Vivekananda's interpretation, without doubt, is the first, maybe but the best interpretation of Yoga Sutras in English available till date.
I like it very much.
Yeah.
Could I ask another question?
Yeah, please. Most welcome. Yeah.
This morning I watched your YouTube video called "Making Sense of Advaita."
Yeah.
And when you discussed the 7 disciplines, you said that the first discipline was accept that the world is changing.
Yeah.
Today you said it was discrimination between the real and the unreal.
Yeah.
Is it the same thing?
Yeah, same thing. Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka. That's the first, that's a kindergarten for every Advaita Vedanta. Nitya Anitya Vastu Viveka. Nitya means the eternal, the real. Anitya means the unreal or the relative. To understand this. Now, this is the beginning of this first qualification for any student of Yoga Vedanta, really speaking. I mean, to understand that everything is changing, so there should be something beyond all this that is changeless. So that should be upheld. And what is changing, we need not discard it, but should recognize that it is not absolute reality. That's all. I mentioned this very clearly because there are many people who try to create this false notion that Shankara's philosophy is a world-negating, life-negating Vedanta. Not at all. Just the opposite of it. Not only that, the point is, and see, if you ask, you can test them. Could you make one statement from any Shankaracharya's commentary? Could you quote one? See, somebody is speaking for 1 hour talking about Shankaracharya's world negation. You have every right to ask that person, that gentleman, whoever it may be, can you quote one verse from Shankaracharya's Bhashya commentary? The person cannot quote. So, we should be very careful. That applies to great teachers of all religious traditions. See, I don't mean to say that we should always go by the old writings or commentaries. But the point is, when we try to openly criticize a system of philosophy, then we should try to learn that philosophy from some knowledgeable teachers who have studied the original scriptures. That is true, you know. If you want when you invite a professor of, let's say, physics, when you want to debate on a subject like the physics, you naturally will invite a professor who has studied physics from another physics professor, who may have studied from another physics professor, and who may have studied from another physics professor. You don't go to debate with a person who has just read one book, some kind of elementary translation. You won't take the trouble to travel long distance and argue with a person who has not studied anything but physics, the subject of physics. So like that, Vedanta also has its own terminology, its own vocabulary, the great books, the great teachers. Well, after studying all this, you can have a different view. That is true. After studying all this writing, at least some of the writing, you can have a different view. But you cannot simply sit somewhere and say that. So that view is very much there. It is totally, absolutely wrong. Wrong, actually.
Does the same thing apply for the word illusion? If someone says the word is illusionary, is that the same as saying it's unreal?
Precisely. See, in that lecture which you referred to just now, I made it very, very clear. Shankaracharya doesn't say this world is absolutely unreal. One should be crazy. I used the word crazy in that lecture. To say that I am not here, you are not there. And not only that, in Shankaracharya's commentary, there is one section where he is refuting the Buddhist view that the dream experiences and waking state experiences are the real. That's a view by Vijnanavadins. Vijnanavadins is subjective idealists in Buddhism. According to them, both the dream experience and waking state experience are equally unreal. Now Shankaracharya strongly says no. And then he says, suppose a person and also there is a view that the phenomenal external world is unreal. That view is there, of course, in the Alaya Vijnanavada. That is a latest Dignaga school also it has got. Pravritti Vijnanavada, which actually doesn't accept the reality of external world. Now Shankaracharya is, no, you are wrong. He says, you are gone, you had a lunch. You can't say you didn't have a lunch. And you used a pot. You can't say I did not use a pot. You are hungry. You had a lunch. You had food. You can't say, no, I was not hungry. I didn't eat a lunch. You cannot say that. Exactly. These words are used by Shankaracharya to show that this empirical world is not totally unreal. That's why Shankara's original philosophy is a beautiful symphony of realism and idealism. And again I mentioned, the most beautiful devotional poetry in Sanskrit language written by Shankaracharya. So, of course, that's a problem. Of course, the problem is not so much from Western authors, from East Indian authors. In India, you find anybody can say anything. At least there are many. That trend is very much there. Of course, that's the beauty of India. Shankaracharya himself had to argue with materialists and hedonists, bohemians, ritualists, nihilists. We call nihilists. He had to argue in his own time, his own day. So today you can find many people. But the tragedy is they have not read a single work of Shankaracharya. That's an important thing. If you can argue with a scientist, because a scientist knows about science. He may not be an authority on Vedanta, but he'll be an authority on science. He may be a professor. But people who know neither science nor Vedanta nor philosophy, they will talk about it. That's the main problem. Of course, we need not bother that much about it. So thank you for the wonderful questions, and if there are anybody else with questions, most welcome. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tatsat Sri Ramakrishna Pranamastu.
The recording has stopped.